If you're struggling with Blender and want to improve your animations, geometry node skills, and procedural texturing, then this course is for you. I will show you high-level techniques, but more importantly, teach you the necessary skills to master the basics, which will elevate your animations from looking like a PlayStation 1 cutscene to renders that will make your friends question how you got this much better in such a short time. You see, I used to struggle with Blender, not because of the tools and the workflows, but because of vision. I was simply looking at renders the wrong way, and you might still be doing that too. However, since understanding these core principles, all of my renders have gone up to an acceptable baseline at least, and awesomeness at its best. You are probably curious as to what we'll create, so here it is.
Cocoa choco, chocolate, Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco choco, chocolate. Bow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack or afternoon delight. It hits just right every time.
Now, the way this Magnum mini course is structured is as follows. First, we'll make a very simple model so you can be done in less than 15 minutes. Then we'll dive into procedural texturing, which is an absolute must for food and product renders in general. Then we're going to make a chocolate simulation using Blender's liquid simulation system. After which we are going to dive into dynamic paint simulations in order to create this render, which I've never seen before in the Blender community. I'll then show you how to make a wrapper in Blender the easy way, and we'll also animate it using the most simple geometry node setup I could come up with. Then for the final animation, we're going to create something cool looking like this. Now, throughout this mini course, I will be using the King of Light bundle pack for all my lighting, but it is not required in order to achieve similar results. If you're interested, you can find the link in the description. So if you want to upgrade your Blender game and stop making these old mistakes, then this Blender course is probably the fastest way to do it. You might know this channel as the only channel that teaches product animation from A to Z, and there are multiple free courses that you can find right here. So I'd kindly like to ask you to subscribe, and let's get started. So you're probably wondering what that was all about. Well, let me tell you a story. So approximately 4 years ago, I busted my knee on a stone planter. And even though I'm a pretty young guy that works out 5 days a week, it really made me think about my health on the long term. Now, one thing that really helps is having a standing desk. Now, I've been lucky enough to get partnered up with FlexiSpot, and they were kind enough to give me this beautiful FlexiSpot E7 Pro. Now, we all know how unhealthy it is to sit behind a desk for multiple hours per day. Sitting is actually not that healthy of an activity, but we kind of have no choice, especially if you work with computers, then, well, you are probably behind the desk. And I know that I've been partnering up with FlexiSpot in this video, but I truly believe that this is a wonderful desk. So as you can see, it is able to hold quite a bit of weight. So it's holding up this giant machine, but it's also able to hold your tiny computer. So if I use one of these custom presets to go into medium mode, so this is my ideal sitting position. I have a standing position. And one of the things that I think is also quite underrated is not only standing, but sitting very low. This will give your legs a lot of extra space. Now, it's quite silent. It is also a beautiful desk. I got the mahogany version, which is a very nice color. You can adjust the height, set it to your positions, make your own presets. It has a child lock, so your child cannot accidentally break your entire system. So right now, if you don't have a standing desk, but do care about your health, then I highly recommend checking out the FlexiSpot website. The link is in the description. And once again, I want to thank FlexiSpot for partnering up with me in this video and providing me with this wonderful desk that I will have years and years of pleasure with. Now let's continue on with the course.
Cocoa choco, chocolate, Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco choco, chocolate. Bow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack or afternoon delight. It hits just right every time.
Hi everybody, so today we are going to be creating this Magnum, and I think it looks pretty cool. It's a very simple model as well, so we should be done pretty quickly. We're going to model it, we're going to texture it, and we're going to light it, and let's get started straight away. File, new, general. Alright, so first let's delete all of this and let's bring in the reference image, which you can get on Patreon for free. Image, reference. Alt R to undo all rotations, RX 90, G and Y, let's bring it backwards. Click on 1 on the numpad, and now we have this. Let's bring it into the middle just a bit more so we can actually see what we're doing. Something like this should probably do the trick. If at any moment you have trouble following what I'm doing, there are keys right here being shown. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on Shift A, Mesh, and bring in a cube. Now the cube can be scaled down, and we're going to bring it down towards this area. Let's scale it, and well, let's just go into edit mode, click on tree in order to select faces, Alt C to look through it. We're going to select this one, And I'm going to scale it only on the x-axis. If you scale it on other things as well, you have proportional scaling of this, but it's actually a flat model. So I'm going to bring this over here, E, scale it on the X, E, S and X, E, S and X, E, S and X, and that should do the trick. Let's select the tab as well, E, S and X, E, E, S and X. Something like this should do the trick. And before we continue now, let's click on all of this, S and Y. Let's make sure it is approximately the thickness of this part. Something like so should do the trick. Let's select the tab, E and S. Don't do S and X. We also want to have some thickness to this chocolate. So S and Y, I think maybe something like this should do the trick. Click on one again, and let's do the exact same thing. S and X. Once again, S and X, bring it up, S and X, bring it up as well, right over here. S and X, bring it up, S and X, S and X, S and X. I'm following the reference on the right side, by the way. E, S and X, and once more. And now we have this. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier. And we can already see that this doesn't look very appealing, so I'm going to turn on proportional editing, S and Y, and let's bring this down just a little bit to make it seem more correct. Let's auto shade this smooth, and I think it could be a bit thicker, so Control plus 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 until we have this entire area. And let's scale it on the Y, and let's take this one, S and Y. Let's bring it inwards just a little bit to get rid of that nasty looking edge. That's great. So now let's go to the bottom side of this. Control plus 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 and plus. Let's separate this. So P, separate the selection. And now we have this part dislocated from that area, and that's nice. I'm going to select this edge by holding Alt and perhaps this one as well. Shift D, P, separate the selection. And now we have this area. I'm going to join it together with this main chocolate. Control J, go into edit mode, and I will select this edge. Alt C, let's also select the other edge right there and search for bridge edge loops. And now both of these are connected like so, and we can sculpt this later on. Let's add some loop cuts, way too thick. S and Y. Something like this. Now let's apply 2 levels of subdivision, Control A, and now we have some more topology to work with. So let's go into sculpt mode, but before we do that, Control A and apply the scale. Let's go to sculpting. Let's keep it on draw, and I will draw this chocolate area right here using the smooth tool as well by holding Shift. And just making something that looks a bit more chocolatey, like so. Let's bring it outwards. And make sure that we have some type of chocolate going on there. Something like this should probably do the trick. Looks pretty cool, and it's flowing over into our mesh, which is nice. So now we also have this chocolate drip. Let's go back into object mode. Let's select this one. I feel like we could add some more geometry by adding some loop cuts. Of course, this messed up our original setup. So let's go back to sculpting and make sure that everything looks nice and clean. And it seems like it has moved over a little bit, and I'm not too keen on that happening. So I'm going to select the entire bottom side like so. Control plus 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 until we get to the area that is being problematic. Let's scale it upwards on the Y, S and Y just a little bit. And let's clean this up a little bit more. So now let's create the letter M. I'm going to duplicate this reference. I will bring it over here, Alt R, click on 7, and now I will add a plane. So let's place the 3D cursor right there, Shift and right mouse click, plane, and add it right over there. And this is simply the game of following the reference, and then we got a letter. So I'm going to bring it right over here. Let's select this edge, G and Y, S and X, no proportional editing, and make sure to follow the reference, it's not that hard. S and X, S and X, right here. Let's follow this. Let's have the mesh, you can find anyways. And I'll bring this towards this side, something like so. Let's take a single flex, bring it upwards. Control R to bring it right there in the middle, and now we can finish this part. S, rotate it a little bit, E, scale it inwards, and once again, like so. And we'll both edges, E, and bring it towards this side. Let's take this flex and let's take that flex as well. And now we can continue onwards, pressing E and scaling it. So once again, over here, now we'll take this flex and scoot over towards this side, then we have this area. I'll click on E, bring it over there, and then bring this flex towards this side. So it kind of looks like the other side as well. So it kind of looks like the other side. Now E, do it again, E, and I'll take this one, bring it all the way. And then we'll take this, then we'll take this. Now we'll take this one, bring it over here, E, and let's take this flex, let's bring it over there. Let's scoot it over to the side, click one, scoot this first E around, E, and E, 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 and SX, E, SX, E, SX. And that should do the trick. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Let's go over here and subdivide it a couple of times, and then we have some cleanup to do. But that will be later on in the process. I'm simply going to select all of this, press E, bring it upwards, and now it looks like this. Of course, we have some harsh edges, and that is because there's way too much geometry over here. So let's select all of these loops that we can get rid of and dissolve edges. Let's do that a couple of times in different areas where we think it can be improved. So over here as well, it's going to be pretty small anyway, so it's not the biggest deal. Right over here, we also have a lot of geometry. Let's get rid of that, dissolve edges, and we can do the same over here. Dissolve edges. So now that we cleaned this up, we have the M4 in this ice cream. Let's delete all of this. Let's go over here, click on one. Let's try to make a circle real quickly. So over here, let's see through it. The circle is supposed to be over there. So I'm going to simply select all of these lines. Let's deselect the other side. Click on Alt Z. Let's click on Y, X, faces. Let's select this inner loop by holding Alt. Let's search for loop tools, circle. And let's scale this inwards just a little bit. E and Y. Bring it in, not too much, just a little bit, and search for grid fill. Grid fill. Play around with the offset right over here until it is straight. There you go, 6 and 13 did the trick for me. Let's add another subdivision, Control 1, and we get some shading issues right over here. That's not the biggest problem, because what we can do is select all of this in the outer area. And let's go to the smooth tool. Let's smooth this so that it's becoming a bit more circular as well. And in order to get rid of those weird shading issues, let's simply select this edge, click on scale, scale it upwards just a little bit to make it a bit more soft, like so. And what we can also do is go into edit mode. Let's select this inner area and add 2 loop cuts, for example. And we can also add an extra layer of subdivision. And now this should look pretty cool. So let's take our letter M. I'm going to duplicate it. RX 90, click on 1, let's bring it towards this side. Scale it down, make sure that the object set origin is set to origin to geometry. Scale it down, and now it will be scaled from the middle. And then we have our M. Let's make sure it is actually in the middle. Let's scale it outwards a little bit, G and Y, until it is going through that mesh. Now I'm going to delete this M. I will take all of this, Shift D, X, place it in its own collection by pressing M, and call it Magnum Model Finished. Turn it off, we don't need it anymore. Let's do some texturing. So right here, let's open up an HDRI. I will use Sunset JHB Central. Apply the HDRI, let's go into the render mode, set this to cycles, GPU compute. And now we can actually start making something cool. So I'm going into the shader editor by dragging this upwards, going to the shader editor, click on render mode so we can actually see what we're doing, click on new, and then I will create a brown looking texture like this. So what I will do is add in a noise texture, Control T, object into the vector, add a color ramp, vector into the vector of the color ramp, and the color into the base color. But of course, this doesn't look very appealing yet, so we have to change some things. I will turn the detail up. I will increase the roughness just a little bit, because it should be quite subtle. I might even increase the scale to 6, and then I will change the color. So for the bright color, I will use the hex code of 5C2400FF. And then for the dark one, 3D1800FF. And now we have a color that looks pretty similar to the original Magnum. But of course we are not done yet because there should be some variation in the roughness to make it look better. So let's once again add a noise texture, Ctrl-Shift-D when on this noise texture, add a color ramp, vector into the vector, color into the roughness. Then I will set the scale to 2.7. Let's decrease the roughness, 2.375 for example. Yeah, we can see some details right here. And I'm going to decrease the amount of roughness to a value that's a bit higher. So increase the black to a more white tone, and then it won't be as reflective, just a little bit. And that's just a slight bit of extra variation to make it seem more real. Now, what you could do is add another bump map. I'm not going to do this, but if you want to do it, you can add a Voronoi, Ctrl-D object into the vector, add a color ramp. Let's have a look at this and set it to distance to edge. Increase the scale by a whole lot, like this. Increase the white values. Add a bump, plug it into the height, normal into the normal, and then you will have this little layer of detail. If you want to do that, you might not want to do that. Now that I have it, I'm probably just going to keep it. We can decrease the strength just a little bit, and this will give the chocolate a bit more texture, like so. Now let's give the letter M the same material, so select that one first, then the chocolate, go over to the material tab, click on this drop-down menu, copy material to selected, and we have the M now as well. What we can even do is connect these two together by using Ctrl-J, and now the M is just part of the ice cream. Now let's do the wooden texture right here, click on New. Let's add a noise texture, Ctrl-T, object into the vector, color ramp. Let's have a look at what we're doing. We need to stretch this out so that we get this wooden type of texture. Let's increase the scale. Let's increase the X value and decrease the Z value until you get something that looks like this. For the darker color, I will use a hex code value of 85512EFF. For the lighter color, I will use CEA17 Best Friends Forever. Color into the color, and let's have a look at this. Looks pretty decent, but we can also make a bump map out of it. Let's select the color ramp, Ctrl-Shift-D. Let's click on backspace to revert it back to normal. Let's add in a bump, color into the height, normal into the normal, and now you can play with the filter width, for example, or the strength and the distance to get to the type of result that you would like to see. Something like this, and that already looks a bit more like that wooden texture we got over there. Now we need to add the logo on top of this. So what I will do is duplicate this principled BSDF, select both of them, Control, numpad 0. This will add a mix shader. Let's bring in an image texture. I'm selecting the Magnum logo. Color into the vector. Ctrl-T, the UV is fine. So let's go over here, click on one, view, project from view. Let's go into the UV editor. Let's scale this up, R90. Let's just make sure that it's somewhat in the area, and that should be fine. Let's go back into the shader editor. Instead of repeat, let's use extend. And this will remove any of the other parts of this logo, so it won't be duplicated all over the place. Then I will set this base color to a more black color. And what do you see? It is showing our original Magnum logo only through this principled BSDF, but we want it to be the other way around. And in order to fix that, I'm simply going to switch the noodles of the principled BSDF. So the bottom one should actually be going into the top slot, and this one should be going into the bottom slot. And we can also add a color ramp to our image in order to increase or decrease the contrast. So let's increase the white. If we do it all the way, you won't be able to see these wooden scratches in between. So I'm not going to do that. I want it to be blended into the wood just a little bit more. It could be a bit more red instead of grayish like we have here. So I'm simply going to select a brownish red tone and increase the lightness of this. Now it also seems as if it's carved in there, and there's two things that we can do in order to emulate that. What I will do simply is go over here, add another bump to this texture, and add a bump map to the other one. Color into the height, color into the height, and the distance should be going into the minus, distance into the minus. And now it's going inward just a little bit. So let's add a light on this real quickly. Area light, RX90, GZZ. Let's increase the power and perhaps even the exposure if we like to do that. And well, I guess this is starting to look a lot like a Magnum. There's some things that I don't like, such as this white area on here. So I'm still going to bring this upwards just a little bit to decrease the roughness effect, like so. And I will also go into the coat, add a complete coat to this, and then it will be very shiny. But I will also increase the roughness and set this to 0.6-ish. That should do the trick in order to make it a bit more reflective. So let me turn that off and on. And now it's just a matter of playing around with the lights to make sure it looks good. But it's got this icy layer over it right now, and we can always decrease or increase this by playing around with the weight of the coat. Maybe in this case I will set it to 0.5. So if we want to finish this render and bring in some ice, let's do that as well. Let's go over here, select our chocolate, let's duplicate it. Let's go into edit mode, select everything, Alt S, and scale it inwards until it has somewhat disappeared, like this. Now we have to go into proportional editing. Let's look through this. And I want this part to be a bit more backwards, so it's really not going through the mesh. So let's isolate the inner part, which is this one. Let's delete the texture, and now it's all white. Let's click on new. First of all, let's add a noise texture, Control T, object into the vector, and let's add a color ramp as well. Let's plug the vector into the vector and the color into the base color. Let's increase the scale to approximately 500, and this will make it so that it's barely visible. So maybe we can crank up the contrast of this just a little bit. And this is going to be enough for the base color. We simply have to change these colors a little bit. So maybe somewhere over there, a bit more yellowish towards this side. And we can do the same for this as well to make it seem like this ice cream color. And then I will add a displacement node, displacement. And we can go over to the material, scroll all the way down to settings. Instead of bump only, select displacement and bump. And this will allow us to displace this mesh. Now let's add a wave texture, Control T, object into the vector, color ramp, color into the vector. Let's have a look at this. All right, it can be distorted a little bit more, and we can rotate it around using the mapping node to make it go a bit more diagonal, like this. And perhaps we can play around with these settings a little bit more. And if we plug the color into the height and the displacement into the displacement, then you will be able to see that we are creating a cool looking pattern right there. Now we can increase the detail and the detail scale and play around with this and the detail roughness as well. We can also add some more variation. So instead of only having the waves, we can also do this with a noise texture. Select this color ramp, Control Shift D to have it be connected to this noise texture. And then I will select both of these color ramps and mix them together in a mix node. Let's click on backspace while we have this color ramp, so it becomes black and white. And now we have some more variation going on here. Let's set the mid level to 0 on the displacement. And if we play around with the scale now, we can see what is going on here. So let's have a look-see. Perhaps increase the scale of the noise texture. Let's now go back. And of course we cannot see the inside now, and in order to fix that I will add a mesh icosphere, and let's just bring this icosphere over here for now. Let's select this mesh, add a Boolean modifier, use the drop tool to select the icosphere and turn off the icosphere. Alright, so select the inside, and I feel like the waves should be less. There's too much visible. Should be more organic. So the values I eventually used. So for the wave texture, the scale is 3.2, distortion on 7, detail 2.05, the detail scale is on 3.58, the detail roughness is almost all the way up to 0.9, and that's basically it. Color ramp is left the same. Now for the noise texture, I used a scale of 404, detail to 2, roughness on 0.5, basically nothing changed. We have this in the color ramp, and I've increased this black value all the way over here in order to give it this type of texture. And I also increased the mix factor to 0.65. You can play around with this in whatever fashion you like. I placed the scale to 0.02 on the displacement. And now finally we have to change this color because I see that it's a bit more yellow. So for the darker color, I used C4A372FF. And for the lighter color, I used FFD186FF. And I will also add a hue, saturation and value node right here and increase the value to make it a bit more bright like the original. Now, you're probably wondering, how are we going to get these lines right here? Let's do that as well to make it look just a little bit better. I'm going to duplicate this original Magnum that we've got. And if you move it around while you get a boolean on it, it's very, very slow. I'm going to set it to solid mode, duplicate this. And now we get a new one right here. And instead of setting the boolean to difference, I will set it to intersect. And now we only get this other area. Now I will apply everything starting from the top. So subdivision, Control A, boolean, Control A. And now this part is loose from the rest. Now there's two ways to go about this. I simply like to select an area right here, press P, separate the selection, and now we can just move it around using proportional editing. So let's click on O in order to enable proportional editing. And let's just play around with this. All right, but this has no thickness. So let's select all of this, press E, and let's just bring it inwards. And we can give it a subdivision surface modifier or add a bevel modifier, increase the segments and play around until we get something that looks a little bit better. Something like this. Let's have a look. All right, so now we have a chipped area right there, and you can do that throughout the mesh multiple times if you would like to do it. P, separate the selection. I will bring it over there. And now you're wondering, how am I going to get this on the eyes perfectly? And well, that is going to be a tough time unless we use the shrink wrap modifier. Shrink wrap object to the cube, and now it is going over there. Let's increase the offset, and now it should be following this reference a bit better. Let's of course change the shape in order to make it more chocolatey. Now let's also add a solidify modifier to give it some thickness, like so. And now we have another chip. I'm going to delete the rest of this. Let's click on 1. And maybe I want the camera to be somewhere over here. So I'm going to place the camera, Control Alt numpad 0. Let's select it. Let's set the camera to 80 millimeters, by the way. GZZ, let's bring it backwards. Let's make sure it's in the middle. I will remove the reference image, like so. Let's bring in a plane. Let's scale it up. Let's bring it down. Broader. Take the back line, G and C, let's bring it upwards. Let's add another bevel right here. Shade this smooth. And now let's give this a color that looks a bit more brownish. Something that's in the same type of range as this Magnum. And for the finishing touch, I am going to bring the plane down, and I will bring in then I will select the back of the plane right here, Shift, right mouse click to place the 3D cursor on the plane, light and point light. Now we'll bring the point light over there. Let's increase the exposure and increase the power. And now we can place it right behind our ice cream and we get this cool looking gradient. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that because this plane is straight, but we are looking at it from this side, is that the gradient is misplaced. So I'm going to simply rotate this plane around until that is no longer the case. Let's go over into the plane. Let's increase the roughness. We can also play around with the metallic, maybe somewhere over here. And now we have a pretty cool looking background. Let's also finish the lighting for this. So we already placed this light, which I will call our key light. I think this is great. Then I will duplicate this, RZ180, GZZ. Let's place it on the back. And now we get a light from the back. Let's scale this upwards, increase the power, and maybe have it be less extreme. So RZ somewhere over to this side. And then we get a pretty cool looking edge. Play around with the exposure. We can play around with the temperature, make it more orangey or more blue. And I'm going to make it more orangey in this case, something like 5000 or. And finally, I will also add a new light, Alt-R. Let's shine it a bit from the top. And that pretty much concludes this entire render. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, I highly recommend clicking on subscribe and liking and watching all of my other videos as well. And if you feel up to it, then you can also check the link in the description where you can get Lumio, which is what I use for all my lighting, such as for the HDRI, the light linking, managing my lights, and all kinds of good stuff. And if you finish this, then you might want to watch the next video as well, where we're going to be animating this Magnum. So I'll see you there.
Cocoa Choco Chocolate, Magnum Ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco Chocolate. Pow! One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, rock a new delight. It hits just right every time. Cocoa Choco Chocolate, Magnum Ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco Chocolate. Pow! One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, rock a new delight. It hits just right every time.
So today we are going to do a chocolate simulation in Blender. I've seen a lot of chocolate simulations and usually they just make a liquid simulation and give it a chocolate color. But in this tutorial we are going to have a look at the viscosity setting in order to get it to look more like chocolate. Now one thing I have to mention is that in Blender liquid simulations are not the best that you can have. And this is also the case for chocolate simulations. Now just to show you what we'll be creating today, you've probably already seen it in the screen by now. But we've got this ice cream that we created in the previous tutorial. And now we're going to make a chocolate simulation, and it's pretty slow by the way, so I cannot really play it in the viewport like this. I do have to warn you that for this specific simulation, I placed it on 256 for the bake, and I couldn't even finish the bake overnight. So I had it turned on for approximately 8 or 9 hours. And in that time, I didn't finish the bake. It came to frame 40 or something, and I just stopped it by then. So let's go over the settings real quickly. When you make a liquid simulation, the very first thing you'll do is you add a flow object, which is this sphere, and we go to the physics settings. You add a fluid by clicking right here and setting the type to flow, liquid, inflow. Sampling substeps to 3. And that's basically all you need to do for your flow object. Now all of this has to take place in a domain. So what you do is you add a cube, you bring it upwards, and you click on fluid type domain. You make this a domain where the fluid can be calculated. Now, the size of this box is the voxel size, which means this is the resolution of your liquid simulation. So if I increase this, you will see that the box gets smaller. Now it's calculating more in a smaller square. That's basically what's going on. So if you increase this to 128, for example, then it will be a really small square, but your calculations will be better. You set this to domain, you set this to liquid, and then let me move this over here. This is just for an example so that you know how to set up a liquid simulation. I kind of assume that you already do know how to make a normal liquid simulation. If not, I have a couple of videos on this channel where you can watch that, especially in the product animation masterclass where we have a liquid simulation on the can. So check that out if you'd like. Either way, here are a couple of the settings. CFL number. This is going to increase the speed of your baking time because it is doing faster computation. By the way, if you hover over all of these, then you will get a tooltip which says maximal velocity per cell, greater CFL numbers will minimize the number of simulation steps and the computation time. So it is giving us instructions on what all of these things do and what we want to achieve. Now for this very specific simulation, what I did is I turned off the bottom so that all the chocolate would be able to fall through this bottom. This was due to some testing that I did, which you can see on the screen right now. And there are two things that we can do. I tried using the APIC because it is better for static meshes and more stable behavior. But in my case, it did give me some pretty weird looking results. So I stick to the flip fluid, even though it is supposed to give you more splashy behavior, as it says right there on the tooltip. I didn't find this problematic at all because I used the specific setting, namely this high viscosity solver. And if you click on this and turn it upwards, it will be very viscous. Now what does viscous mean? Now viscosity is basically the way a fluid resists flowing. So things with a very low viscosity are flowing a lot. So water is quite flowy, it can splash out of each other. But things like honey, for example, are more viscous, which means that it is not going to flow out as much. It's going to be more sticky, basically. So what's going on? Right here we have the high viscosity solver, and you basically have two options. You can either turn on the diffusion and use one of these models, play around with these settings, but I found that this took me too much time in order to get to a pretty decent looking result. You can also use one of the presets, such as honey, oil, or water, but in this case I really didn't want to use it. I just used the high viscosity solver, played around with the strength, and the strength I finally used is right here, is the 0.02. Now, if I have a look at this, I basically had all my settings on default except for 2. So we have the high viscosity sulfur, which I set to 0.020. I left all of this alone, all of this as well. It's all just default values, except for the field weights, which I unfolded, and I set the gravity to 2. Because using the viscosity sulfur, I find that it was too slow. Okay, so then I'll change the strength right here for the viscosity, but then I find it was too fast or still too slow. So I decided to speed it up by increasing the gravity for this scene. Now, basically what it came down to is I animated this ball to go from left to right and drop some chocolate on this ice cream. But you might be wondering, how can I drop it on the ice cream? Won't it fall through automatically? And yes, that is the case unless you select the ice cream, go to the Physics Properties tab, go to Fluid and set this as an effector. And an effector is basically a collision type object. So this means that the fluid can interact with the effector, which is the collision type object. I also set the sampling substeps to 3. So basically what happens then is you turn this render on. I don't find that this is absolutely perfect, by the way. I think there's a lot of problems with this. If you play this, you can see some of those waving motions going on, but I can deal with it right now because it's a very high resolution division. But if you have a lower resolution division, it will not look as good. So 128 was too low actually to have good quality. So 256 was the only one acceptable enough for me. So let's see, the final thing that I would like to show you is the way I changed this shader. So in the previous tutorial, we made this chocolate shader. It has some details in here. We have played around with the roughness, the colors, we added a coat. It's very simple. It's a very simple material, here it is. But I made some changes to this material for the chocolate. So if I click on the chocolate right here, you can see that I basically just played around with the roughness and the metallic slider. So I placed the metallic slider up a little bit. So here it was 0 and here the roughness looked different. But on this one, we simply made the roughness entirely black. I could have just done it like this. And the metallic up just a little bit to give it this shiny type of look. If you turn that off or turn it all the way on, I don't know, it's just going wrong a little bit. So somewhere over here I found to be the perfect value. And what I also did, because it turned out in the render that it gave some very weird highlight effects, is turn off the bump. So with the bump on, we were getting some type of weird noise looking patterns right there. And I didn't like it in the final render, especially when it moved. So I removed this from the texture. And that's actually the way to make a chocolate simulation. You set up a flow object, set it to inflow with a sampling substep of 3. You add a domain, and in the domain you will not change any settings except for the high viscosity sulfur, and maybe you want to increase the resolution division and the gravity. Finally, you just wait for one night to bake a couple of frames, and then you'll say, all right, this is good enough, and now I'll continue to the next shot. I hope you enjoyed this video. Click on subscribe, and in the next video we are going to be creating this shot, so click right here to watch it.
Cocoa Choco Chocolate, Magnum Ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco Chocolate. Wow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, a new delight. It hits just right every time.
So today we are going to be creating this animation. It's going to be a very fun tutorial. It's going to be a very short tutorial as well because it's not that hard actually. So I've already brought in the Magnum that we created a couple of episodes ago. I also have the inner part for this, and if you remember, the inner part, let me go into Eevee mode. The inner part is this ice cream type texture. Now, what we want to do is create a boolean for this Magnum in order to be broken into 2 parts. So I will select all of this. I will place it into its own collection, which is going to be Magnum 1. I will then click on Shift A, Mesh, and let's bring in an icosphere. Now, for this icosphere, we can bring it all the way over there. And in order to make it look a little bit better when we use the boolean, we can add some more to this. So I will first add a subdivision surface modifier. Then I will go to the modifiers, add a displace modifier. If you click on new, then you will get this little icon right here. If you click on it, you will automatically be redirected to the texture tab. Now I will click on type and it will be clouds. And now we can play around with the cloud settings, with the scale, for example. This will determine the way that our chocolate will be broken into different parts. This is just an easy way to get some more detail in there. Now I will go back into the modifier tab and we can play around with the strength and maybe see something that we like. I think I'm going to keep it subtle like this. shade this smooth. Then I will go into the chocolate, go back to the modifiers and already add a Boolean modifier right here. And we are going to set it to difference, take the picker tool, select our icosphere, and now the icosphere will basically break apart this chocolate. So if you turn it off in the viewport, you can already see what this is going to look like. Now we're not going to apply it yet. We are going to select our ice cream from over there, add another Boolean, and select this object. Very good. And if we now turn this off, we get our first part of the ice cream. It's already starting to look pretty cool. The way to go about this is we want 2 parts instead of only 1. So what we need to do is select all of this. Then I will duplicate it, leave it in the same place, click. I will place it into its own collection by pressing M, new collection. This will be Magnum 2 or Magnum Top, give it whatever name you would like. I will turn this off for now so we can only see the first one that we created. And I will go into the subdivision and the Boolean and apply all of those in order. Now do the same for this one. There you go. Then I will turn these off, turn the other one on, go back, click on this mesh first. And instead of using difference, we are going to be using intersect, and that will give us the other area. Now I will once again apply all of this. Now once again for this one, set it to intersect. And then we will get the opposite area. And I will click on Control A to apply all of this. And now we have this part over here. And we have the other part on the bottom. Basically what we can do now is make sure that these are broken up. What I'm going to do is simply place our 3D cursor right there. Let's place an empty. G and Y, make sure that it's somewhat in the middle. Select the inner part, the outer part, the empty last, Control P. Object keep transform, and now everything should follow this empty. And now I will add another one, cursor to selected, image, plane axis. Let's bring this upwards, somewhere in the middle. Let's select all of these objects, select the empty last, Control P, object keep transform, and now it should follow along with the empty. But I see we have an extra stick right there. We don't need that at all. So that's the very first part of this tutorial. Now we are going to do the animation for this, and then afterwards we are going to bring in a particle system. So I'm going to click on 1 and I will select both of these empties and press I, and now both of these will have a keyframe. Then I will go over to frame, let's say 72, maybe 48 is fine, I don't know, we'll see later on. Let's select this empty, let's rotate it, let's make sure that we can see the inside a bit for this one and rotate it like that. So click on I, then I will select this one and perhaps it is going the other side. Press I, let's see what that would look like. Up. All right, and now it's breaking apart. We can go into the graph editor by pressing Control Tab. While in the timeline, it will automatically bring you to the graph editor. Let's open this up. Let's have a look at all of these. And I'm going to click on normalize because I like to see all of these lines between -1 and 1 instead of having them be all over the place like this. So I'm going to select this empty as well. And now we have everything selected, so it seems. And then I will select these lines, S and Y, bring it all down. Now this line is going down very fast. This one is going up very fast, which means that it's going to break apart a bit faster like this. Now I'm going to press S and X and bring it even closer to the beginning. And I feel like the bottom one is not cooperating enough. So let's have a look at this. S and, let's select this, S and X. Let's bring it even closer. Pop, pop. Yeah, very cool. Pop. If you want it to be even faster, I'm going to select all of these left handles for the last keyframe as well and bring it to the left. Pop. Now, instead of it breaking straight away, let's maybe place it somewhere over here to frame 10. Pop. So now we have some time to move into this with the camera and then the animation happens instead of it happening too quick for us to even see what's going on like this. All right, so that's the animation, very simple stuff. Now we need to add a particle simulation. So what I'm going to do is Shift A, Mesh, add an icosphere. I will bring this right over here and give it a chocolate texture by selecting the chocolate last, holding Shift, go to the Material Properties tab, open this up, copy material to selected, and now we have an icosphere with chocolate. I'm going to bring this into its own collection by pressing M, Choco Bits. Then I will go into edit mode, click on O for proportional editing, select the vertex and move this around to make it look like chocolate bits. Something like this. Then we'll add another one. Very cool. Let's make sure they are a bit randomized. Like this, and perhaps from another side, another angle. The more you have, the better it will look. I will give them all a subdivision of 1 or 2, depending on the way it looks. Shaded smooth, and there you have it. So now we have those choco bits in their own collection, and now we need to make sure that we have a particle simulation for this chocolate. So we'll select the outside area of this, and if I go into edit mode, you can actually see that we have some area selected right here. And this is the part that was selected when we destroyed the mesh with the boolean. Now, if you are not seeing this, you can go into dash and select them all very carefully by holding C and selecting all of this, like so. It doesn't really matter if you go outside it a little bit, like this. You can always remove it holding Control. For example, I'm going to click on 3. Now go into the Object Data Properties tab right over here, Vertex Groups plus Assign, Control I, Remove. So now we should have this area as a vertex group. So let's click on dash once again. Let's go into the particle system. Let's add a new particle. It's going to be an emitter type. And from frame 10 onwards, from frame 10, it is going to explode, I believe. So frame 10, that's when we should have the animation start. So frame start, 10, end at 11, because we only want one small burst. It shouldn't be continuous particles coming out of this. So let's go over to render. Let's select collection. Let's select the collection choco bits. And then I will increase the scale randomness. And let's have a quick look at this for now. Ah, there you go. We have our particle system. Very cool. I think they are a bit too big, so I'm going to scale this down. Now they all do look the same, so I don't think they are getting the right one. So I will select pick random, and that will select some random choco bits from our collection. Yeah, so it's falling down. We don't want that. And an easy solution for this would be to go down here, field weights, gravity, all the way down. And now it is just going from our, well, entire mesh in this case, because we haven't assigned it to our vertex group. So let's go to vertex groups, and for the density, select our group. Pow! So now it's moving in all of these directions. I can see a couple of issues. The lifetime is too short, so let's increase this all the way to whatever you like, as long as it's longer than your timeline. No need to do the lifetime randomization. We are not making particles or fire, embers, stuff like that. Now I'm going to open up the velocity. One thing I'm annoyed by is that it's only coming from this side and it's not going in all directions. So the easy way to fix that would be to set the tangent to a negative value. So let's place this to a negative value. Let's see what it does. All right. Let's set the normal to 0. It's kind of going through each other. I don't like that. So we're going to set the tangent phase to -1. And now it's all moving outwards. Very cool, but it's not very randomized. We can probably do something with that. Object velocity, randomize. That's starting to look pretty cool. And then we are going into the rotation and turn up the randomization phase and randomize phase. I just use some random values for these always. And well, it kind of looks cool now. We have our choco bits coming out. Pew! Very good. But it can be faster, so the tangent can be brought down even more, like -2.5. Like this. Maybe even faster. Papa. All right. Let's play around with the randomization. There you go. Now, I don't want it to be this fast so late in this animation. It should only be fast in the beginning, like puff, breaking out. And from here onwards, it should be a whole lot slower. So how can we do this? Simply go over to, where is it? Physics, integration, and there you will see time step. So on frame, let's say 13, I'm going to press I. And then on frame, let's say 16, I'm going to bring this all the way down to 0.01. Press I. Now let's see what happens. Boom. And then it is going in slow motion. Pow. That looks very cool. I like it when it looks like that. Let's give it a background. So let's add a plane. G and Y. Let's scale this upwards. Let's go into the shader editor. New. Let's make this a brownish type color that fits with the scene. I will go into cycles, turn on motion blur by the way. Render mode. Now it's pretty dark. So let's add a HDRI. I'm going to add Sunset JHB Central. If you still don't know what this add-on is, it's Lumio and it's basically a better version of Blender's lighting system. So I'm going to bring in a light, point light, and I will bring it towards this plane. And then I will go into IES and give this an IES texture. I'm just going to select the first one and increase the strength. Now it looks like this. Let's click on 1. Go into the output. Let's flip this around. 1080 by 9020. Go into the camera. Let's set it to 80mm. Let's go to viewport display, passepartout. Let's make sure that we get this entire thing in the screen. And now we have some cool type of gradient for the background as well. We can play around with the color and stuff like that. I'm going to leave that up to you. Maybe a dark brown looks pretty premium as well. Now all you need to do is add some lights, something like this. Maybe rotate it around here, like so. And then we have a pretty cool looking light. I'm going to the particle system once again. I will turn down the scale and have a lot of bits and pieces, maybe 5,000. Would that look cool? I don't know. Let's have a look-see. It's pretty cool, but I think we can improve one more thing. So let's go over to the icospheres for our choco bits. Let's duplicate this and let's scale it up. And now we also get some larger bits and pieces from here instead of only these small parts. So let's play around with this until we get to the desired result. Wow. Yeah, very cool. So now we have our breaking Magnum animation. I think this is awesome. All right, so that's pretty much it for this breaking animation. You can go into the particles, go to cache and click on bake. I'm going to place a small camera animation on this simply so it fits better with the previous scene because we zoomed out. Let me show you real quick. So we have this chocolate simulation and it is zooming in the end. So it's kind of... And I want to emulate that at the start of this render. I'm basically going to have the camera come in the same fashion. So I hope you have a pretty cool looking render. If you would like to check out the King of Light bundle pack, it would help support me as a creator. And I will see you in the next video where we're going to be making this animation.
Cocoa choco, chocolate. Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco choco, chocolate. Wow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, a afternoon delight. It hits just right every time.
Welcome to this wonderful tutorial. This is what we're going to be creating. Now it is going to be a bit of a tougher tutorial than normal, but I think the result is pretty cool looking. So let's get started straight away. First of all, I've already set up a scene with an HDRI right here, and I'm going to add a plane. Now this plane is going to serve as our liquid, which is going to be the wave, and the wave will be made using dynamic paint, but we'll get to that later. So we got our canvas right here and I will go into edit mode, Control R, let's give it some geometry to work with. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that for this side as well. Let's first select this material, go to the materials and copy material to select it. So now it's already this cool looking chocolate material. Now, to show you the magic, I will select this object, go to the Physics Properties tab, click on Dynamic Paint. I will make this a brush because this is the brush that is going on the canvas. Then I will select this plane. This will be Dynamic Paint, Canvas, Add Canvas, and make sure to set the surface type to Waves. And now if we press on play and drag this out here, then what do you have? We have some ripples from this chocolate going through the plane. Very good. So the base setup is already done. I'm going to select this inner area, this part, and this stick. And I'm simply going to place this down for now. I will click on I, and then perhaps after 3 seconds or 80 frames, it should be all the way on top. Like this. And press I once again. I'm going to make this a linear animation, so press A, T, linear. Now what's happening? Well, this thing is moving through the plane and revealing itself. But it's already chocolate. Wouldn't it be cool if this is gone, and then once it enters through, it becomes this chocolate. That would be very cool. Now, we need some geometry nodes in order to get this to work. Let's do it. Let's go over here, Shift S, cursor to selected. Then I will add in a cube. I will bring this up holding Control, set this to 3D cursor, scale it upwards so we have enough space to work with. And then I will go over here to the geometry nodes editor. Click on new, group input is right over there. And basically what we're going to do is use a mesh boolean trick. So Shift A, mesh boolean or boolean mesh boolean, right over here. And the first mesh that we are going to be using is the white one, cube 4. I'm going to call it vanilla. And then I will call this choco shell. So we know what we're working with. Click on the geometry nodes, vanilla, placed right in here. Relative, because it has an animation, so we don't want to just use a single position. Geometry into the mesh, and this geometry of the cube can be our Boolean object, which means that right now the white part should be removed. If we plug this in, of course. We have to turn it off in the viewport as well. So now let's see what's going on here. It is moving in and it is disappearing. This white area is disappearing. So all we need to do now is make sure that the black area appears. Now we'll do it. Let's go to the geometry node editor. There you go. Let's select the good one. And I will use another mesh boolean. Take our geometry input and have it be the mesh. I will join the both of these together. And now we need a first mesh, and that is going to be the choco shell. Oh, oopsie. Choco shell, right over here, set it to relative, geometry into the mesh. But now the choco shell will basically disappear as well. So we're going to set the operation to intersect. And let's see what's going on now. We have to plug this in again. Let's go to the timeline, and what do we have? Wow, it is working. Some simple math. How amazing is this? And we are getting our chocolate out of here. Alright guys, so there is one more problem, and that is if there is not a solidify modifier on our original vanilla, then watch what happens. I'm going to turn this off in the render. What do we have? We have some terrible shading going on here due to the boolean. This is basically destroying our mesh, and it's also doing it here on the top. This means our render is looking very ugly. So the way to solve this is to go into vanilla, this one, which is our original mesh for this one, if you remember. Then we're going to add a solidify modifier and just leave it to the default settings. This is fine. And if I now render the same image, you will see there's no problem anymore. There you go. So in this way you can solve that problem. And now all we have to do is create a good camera animation and make some good lighting, and then we will be done. I don't like that this is a plane. I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to simply give it some more geometry. Let's scale up this plane, RX 90, G and Y. Let's bring it right over there. And maybe we'll give it the same type of color as I did in the previous videos. Like shader editor, new, make it brownish and dark. And then we will have a dark background. Let's turn the camera into a Instagram format, 1080 by 1920. Let's make sure it is centered and all. Something like this. We could zoom this in using 80. And perhaps I want to track this along. Maybe something like this. Timeline. It's going to start right here. I think this one can be a little bit faster, but still I'm going to set it to 72. And then it will be right here. And in the camera, I'm going to make sure that this part right here is out of focus. So I will go to the camera properties, go to depth of field, and I will select the chocolate. Then I will play around with the f-stop until this is the case. And that will make it look a little bit better instead of having a plane through which it is just passing there. What I think would be funny is if this area, so let's add a loop cut right there. One of these is going to be yellow and one of these is going to be brown to show the different color contrasts. I will select the top part, and this will be assign this type of yellow. Now, if you want to change the waves, you can go into the physics properties tab. And one thing I found that I like a bit is the smoothness going all the way down, because this will make sure that the waves are a little bit higher. You can also play around with the time scale and the speed. If you increase the speed, for example, the water will go like crazy. I don't think this looks very good for a chocolate animation, but nonetheless, this is just something that you can play around with. Here, look at this. Now it's going crazy. Just do with this whatever you like. I found that these settings work fine for what I'm trying to do, so keep that in mind. Time scale at 1, speed at 1. Everything is basically default except for the smoothness, which is 0.1. Now, when done, you can click on bake and bake this entire simulation, and then you can render this out. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, click on subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Cocoa Choco, chocolate. Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco, chocolate. Pow! One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, a afternoon delight. It hits just right every time.
Welcome to the next part of this Magnum mini course. So today we are going to be creating this animation. It's going to be quite simple, so let's get started straight away. The first thing we need to do is make a gift wrapper for going around this model. So what I'm going to do is simply go to Image, Reference, and select the reference image, which you can get on Patreon for free. There it is. Press Alt-R, RX. I will select this, Shift-S, cursor to selected, Shift-A, Mesh, Cube. Let's select the cube and bring it somewhere over here. Now I'm going to scale it on the Z-axis, click on 7, and I will make a line right in the middle, click on 3, Alt-C, select all of this, delete the faces, go to the modifiers, add a mirror modifier, and now we can work on both sides at the same time. Now first I'm going to select this, S and Y, then I will click on 3, select this edge, E, and let's bring it inwards, S and Y. Make sure to use the Y instead of only S, otherwise it will scale proportionally and it will look weird. So E and S, S and Y. Let's do it again over here. S and Y, S and Y, and E. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier, Control 3, and now it looks like this. Now, I think that this area right here is a little bit higher. So I'm going to select both of these, like this, S and Z, and make sure that it actually fits in there. Then I'm going to select this entire area and that area, S and Z, and let's scale it down to make it a bit more flat. And also select this part, S and Z. Let's make it a bit more flat. And then we have the wrapper almost done. So there's two ways to go about this part, and I will simply add a lot of geometry in order to get it done. I think that's the easiest way for now. So I will add all of these loop cuts. Then I will select all of these faces right here by holding Control. Go to Select, checker deselect. And now we have a couple of those. Press E. And I want to scale these on the individual origins. So I'm going over here, individual origins, S and Y, and scale all of these like so. Now I do think it can be more flat, so Control plus, S and Z, and let's make it pretty flat. Now I'm going to select these two areas, select similar area, then click on Control minus, and then we should have all of these selected, S and Y. Let's Control plus, S and Z, and let's make it even flatter. This is good enough for what we are trying to do. First, we're going to add a texture. So I'm going right over here to the shader editor, click on new, and then I will bring in an image texture by pressing Ctrl T on the principal BSDF. You need to have Node Wrangler enabled for this. And I've brought in the same image that we used as a reference. Let's scale this on the Z. I think it's a bit too fat. Click on 7, go over here. Let's apply the mirror, by the way. U, project from view. Go to the UV editor. Let's go to the viewport display and make sure that this fits on the entire model like this. Now let's go over here to the shader editor back again, and let's bring down the roughness. I want it to be a bit more shiny, and that's basically it. Now I don't like how flat it is on the sides, so I'm going to add a couple of loop cuts right here. S and turn on proportional editing, select only the middle one, S and Y. And let's stretch it out like this. So I guess that's pretty good. Let's also select this part where we have some white. And then go back into the UV shader editor, bring it upwards just a little bit. So now we have the wrapper. I know this is a bit of a sketchy way to do it, but still it will work out. So just roll with it. Let's delete the reference. Now let's take this mesh, R and Y 90, RC 90, RC 180, RY 180, and then I will bring it over here so the ice cream fits right in there. S and Y, S and Z, just make sure it fits in there. like so. Now, we don't want to be filming from this area because it looks kind of bad. And of course, you try and fix that by scaling it up and placing it on a different part of the mesh, like right over here. But it will not look good either way. So we have to film from this side. So let's go over to the geometry nodes editor, click on new, and I'm going to add a mesh boolean. Then I will add a curve icosphere. Let's bring it over here. Let's give it a modifier, Control-3, displace, new. Click on this to go to the texture tab. Click on clouds and well, maybe something like this to give it some more randomization. And then we'll go back into this area, and instead of the coordinates local, I will use global, because if we do that, it will move when we scale it up, for example, or move it upwards. And now we can use this as a boolean for this mesh. So let's select the icosphere, let's bring it in here, geometry into the mesh, and it should be relative. And if we turn off this icosphere right here, then you will be able to see that it's gone. Very good. Now, in order to keep working with this, let's go to the Object Properties tab, Viewport Display, Display as Wire, Bounce, Box. So now we can easily select it as well. So now let's bring this up, and on frame 72, I will press I. And on frame 0, I will scale this all the way up. So something like this, and bring it down as well until it is gone. So now if we turn it off and play this animation, what's supposed to happen is that our wrapper is being built like this. I think it's a bit too chaotic, to be honest. So I'm going into the modifiers and decrease the strength of this displacement by a lot. And that will make it a bit more smooth, while still giving us enough randomization. So like this, it is going inwards and it's building our mesh. That looks very cool. Now, you could do some other things with this, such as spawning a particle system on the edge of this, for example. I'm not going to do that for now, we'll just keep it very simple. I'm going to add a plane for the background. Let's add in a HDRI. I'm going to select the Sunset JHB Central, which I've been using for this entire mini course. And then I will slightly move it towards this side, perhaps have a camera from over here. Go to this tab, turn this around, 1080, 1920. So let's place a point light right over there, point light. Let's increase the strength of this by a lot. And this will give us a gradient for behind this animation. I will select the camera. I will go to the 70-second frame. Let's scale this inwards, press I, and go to frame 0. Let's move it outwards because I wanted to start with a zoom in. Then I will go to the graph editor right over here. And I'm going to keep this simple as well. Click on normalize because I want to see what I'm doing. Then I will do S and Y. Let's scale this like so, G and X. And this should make sure that our camera is coming in with a zoom. And we can play around with this in order to make it look good, of course. And then the wrapper should start appearing going over this Magnum. Now, if you want to make this animation a little bit more interesting, because now it's simply going upwards, we can also give it some movement, and there's a special technique for that, and I will show you this right now. It's actually from my very underrated lattice tutorial about how to animate lattices. So let's go Shift A, let's add a lattice. I will scale this up to make sure that the entire object fits into this. And then I will go into the lattice properties right over here and increase the W to give it some more geometry. Let's do the same over there. Make sure we get some squares. 3, 4, something like this should do the trick. Then I will select our wrapper. I will select the lattice, Control B, lattice deform. And now if we move this lattice, then the entire object should move along with it. Which also means that if we play around with this, then we can manipulate very specific parts of this mesh. But in this case, I'm going to keep it very simple. I will go to the modifiers, add a simple deform, set it to twist, and the twist should be on the Z-axis. Then I will go to the very first frame. I will increase this angle to around 180, and you can see that this is twisting up our entire mesh. Let's click on I, then go to the final frame and set this to 0. Click on I, select all of this, T, linear, So it is twisting into existence as well. And that's just the final little touch that you can add to this animation to make it slightly better. Very cool. So now we also have a cool twisting animation as it is being built up, like so. I think this looks very cool. Now for the final part, I noticed that the animation is starting way too late, and that is due to our icosphere moving too slow. So I will select the icosphere. Let's take all of these keyframes, and on frame 0 I want it to be starting already. So something like this. And then it's immediately starting as the camera is coming in already. Alright, so that's the way to make a wrapper animation using the mesh boolean and a lattice in order to make it a bit more special. And I think this looks very cool. I'm going to add some lighting to this to make it slightly better. So that's it for this animation. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a cool thing or two. In the next one, we are going to be creating the final animation for this Magnum mini course. So I will see you there. Oh, and click on subscribe.
Cocoa Choco, chocolate. Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco, chocolate. Bow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snacker, rock a new delight. It's just right every time.
Welcome back to the next part of this Magnum mini course. We are going to be creating the final animation and it looks like this. Now, I've already brought in the ice cream right here and this wrapper. Now, the wrapper doesn't look very good from the side, but we already figured that out in the previous tutorial. So I'm going to press on 1, place the camera right here by pressing Ctrl, Alt and 0. I will go into this output property and make it Instagram format, 1080 by 1920. And let's place it somewhere over here so that it's in the middle. Now, what I'm going to do is I will take this wrapper, and I'm not sure why it's so slow. And I will bring it over here with Y. And the first thing I'm going to do is have it come from this area, something like this, press I. Then I will bring it backwards in a couple of frames, maybe 1 second even. I'll bring it right over there, like this, rotate it around just a little bit, press I, and then it's moving backwards. Then right here, I want it to transition, so I'm going to press R, XX, and make a full rotation like this. Whoop, there you go. And somewhere in the middle of this animation, this should disappear and our ice cream should appear. And this is exactly what we are going to do. But first, let's make sure the animation looks smooth. Let's go into the graph editor. Let's drag this upwards, normalize. Let's go over here, a dot, and now we can see what we're doing. I want it to be fast in the beginning. This is especially true for the Y location. So I'm going to bring it backwards, something like this. Whew. Yeah, it's moving out. Shoof. And then it should transition more into the rotation. So what I find is that the rotation is starting somewhere over here, but it should already be starting while it's moving. So I'm going to select both of these keyframes, move them to the side. So I'm going to select this X keyframe, move it to the side. And then it's slowly moving into this as well. So grab the right handle. Yeah, and now it's smoothly transitioning into the rotation instead of the rotation starting straight away. Whoop, like this. It can be a bit faster in the middle, so I will select this outer handle, move it to the left. Whoop. Yeah, something like this. And somewhere in this middle, right there, we want it to transition to this ice cream. Now, the way to do this is actually quite simple. I'm going to press on this wrapper, Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's add in a empty. Plane axis. Then I will go and take this ice cream and move and bring them together by pressing Ctrl J, Shift S, selection to cursor. We'll bring this down and maybe scale it up so it fits better with the size of this object. R and C. And this one can be connected to the empty, Ctrl P, keep transform. And otherwise, the empty can be selected first, then the gift wrapper, Ctrl P, keep transform. And now what happens? Our ice cream is moving along perfectly with this gift wrapper. So the only thing we need to do is go over here and make sure that this is invisible on frame 24. It's underneath the cube, underneath the empty, and we can simply select the render right here, and I will select this, press I, so here it will not be visible. You can see this if you render it, it will not be visible. And then on frame 25, I will click this on, press I, and then it will be visible, and I will do the exact opposite for the GIF wrapper. So for this one, there's the cube. I will make sure it's turned off right here, and on frame 24 it is turned on, like so. And pop, right here, on frame 26 we should only see the chocolate, and that is the case. I'm going to select this ice cream once more, Shift D, Y, bring it right behind the other one. I will press Alt P to clear all the parents, because it is parented to the empty right now. And now I can move this separately from the other one. So let's click on our camera view, and the animation is done on frame 35. So select the empty, click on I, then select this ice cream. Let's bring it over here, press I, and then let's make sure that this ice cream is not visible at all until this very moment. So on frame 35 it should be turned on, and anything before that it should be turned off. So let's see if that is the case. That is not the case because it has taken all the keyframes from this one as well. Cool. So first let's do this one, R and Y. Let's I want it to move from the stick and not from this empty. So I will go over here, Shift, right mouse click, go to 3D cursor as a pivot point, R and Y. Bring this over here. Let's set this from 35 to 55, for example. R and Y, this will be going this way. Press I. Then I will select this one, place the 3D cursor right there. We already placed a keyframe on number 35. 55, it should be going this direction. Press I. Pop. Very cool. Now let's select the empty and this ice cream. Then I will go over here, select everything, and make sure that we get these handles, S and Y. I will take the left handles of the right keyframe as well, G and X, bring it towards this side. Whoop, pop. Yeah, there you go. So the animation is going like this, pop, and it's showing itself. So all we need to do now is make sure that this is a different texture. I want this one to be the white Magnum. So let's go to the shader editor. Let's select this. We have our chocolate material right here, copy it. And I will simply change these colors to look more like that yellowish one. I guess something like this should do the trick. One thing I'm noticing though is that it is now turned around in its final animation, and we are not seeing the M right here which we created, and I don't like that. So what I will do is go into the Object Properties tab, go to Delta Transform, and the rotation on the Z should be this. So 180 should do the trick. But now I notice that the white one also doesn't have the M. So in order to fix that, let's go to the Object Data Properties, and let's set the scale for the X and Y to -1. Let's see, everything is looking good. Let's see if it didn't mess up our animation. It didn't. And now everything is fine. So all we need to do now is add some lighting and a background, and then we will be done. So I will bring in the plane, RX90, let's bring it in the background. Let's scale it up, make sure that only that is visible. Go to the shader editor, new. Let's add a color, maybe a dark brownish, and I will also set this to cycles. All right, so now we have this animation. It is going like this, turning around like so, and perhaps we can make some changes to the background and bring some lighting in here. So let's add a light, area light. I will use Lumio in order to position it on this, move it backwards, scale it upwards, and increase the power a bit. Let's rotate it around this object to find a good spot. A bit more from the side, like this, increase the power. Now let's add another one, Shift D. Let's go into Lumio, and perhaps this one can be shined from the back. So we'll click on 2, use left and right mouse click at the same time. Press 3, and then it will rotate around here, give it a cool edge light. So something like this, and that makes it look a bit more premium. So this is what it was before, and now we have this, making it look a whole lot better. Now, perhaps for the background, instead of what we are doing right now, let's turn off the point light. So now let's add a spotlight instead. So now let's go to the asset browser. Let's bring in the Ultimate Gobo pack, which I got right here. I will use a tree, and I will use the real normal tree number 2. Bring it in there, very good. Let's go into Lumio, increase the power. Let's increase the blend. Let's go to the shader editor and decrease the value to make it a bit bigger and shine at it from the side. Increase the exposure. Let's increase the radius as well. And now that looks pretty premium if you ask me. All right, so this is me from the future. And what I find is that this transition didn't come out well enough. And I think we can make a slight improvement that will make it a whole lot better. So I'm going to select our wrapper, go to the Data Object Properties tab right over here and click on Shape Keys twice. So now we have 2 keys. And then I will go into Edit mode, make sure that the first key is selected. And what I'm going to do is select this, turn on proportional editing by pressing O, and follow the shape of the ice cream so that it's already turning into the shape of the ice cream before the transition even happens. And I'm also going to take all of this, for example. Let's select it like so, S and Y. So now if we play around with this value, it is already turning into the shape of the ice cream. And we're going to do this right before it is getting turned off. So let's say from frame 20, I'm going to press I. Let's go to frame 25. Let's increase the slider to 1. Press I. And now it should be turning into this ice cream before it has even happened. So I'll give that a try. I will render this out. And now let's make the rest of the animation, which you will see right now. Let's go over here. Let's turn on motion blur. Let's give this a designated folder, because in the next video I will show you exactly how I render all of my files nowadays. I use Batchy Blendy, which is a program I created. This allows you to select multiple blend files and render everything at once. I hope you enjoyed this mini course thus far and that you created a lot of cool things. If you are interested in getting the King of Light bundle pack, where I got all of these gobos, where I use Lumio, I also have this bundle pack with 365 gobos, which is also part of it. So if you're interested in that, there's a link in the description, and I will see you in the next video.
Cocoa Choco, chocolate, Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco, chocolate. Bow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, a rock, a new delight. It hits just right every time.
So in this part of the mini course, I will show you exactly how to use Batchy Blendy. Batchy Blendy is a program I created to render renders overnight. It's very simple. I'm going to click on Clear All and remove all of this. Depending on the Blender version you used, you should find the Blender executable path. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you use Blender 4.5, you want to make sure that you have Blender 4.5 right here. Now, click on Browse, go to your program files, go to Blender, Blender 4.5, and select the application right here. Now it's set to Blender 4.5, which is what I used for this entire course. Now we're going to add some blend files. So right here is where I saved all the blend files for this course. We got the final Magnum animation, the Magnum wrapper, Magnum braking for tutorial, and I had already rendered out the liquid. So let's click on Open. That will add all of those files. And if I now click on Render All, which is what I'm going to do when I will go to sleep, and it will render everything. Now if you do click on Render, the place where the images will be stored is in the output folder that you specified in this blend file. So for each blend file, you need to have the output folder specified, and then it will render according to your settings. This doesn't open Blender, by the way, it will just render it in the background. So you also don't have viewport performance issues, for example. There's not that much to say about this program. I just think it's very useful that if you have multiple renders, which take approximately 30 minutes, then it's a waste to render it during the day, but you also can't wake up in the night every time in order to turn on a new render. In this way, you can simply segment all your renders and make sure that everything is being done overnight. I think that's pretty cool. So if you're interested, it's on Gumroad and the link is in the description. I hope you enjoyed this mini course thus far. If you did, click on subscribe and I will see you in the next one.
Cocoa Choco, chocolate, Magnum ice, it's chocolate. Choco Choco, chocolate. Bow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, a rock, a new delight. It hits just right every time.
I hope this course was useful for you and that you've learned a lot about animations. I'm going to release a full course pretty soon and it's going to contain the best lessons I've ever created. For now, if you want to upgrade your lighting game, one of the most important things that you can do in Blender to get better renders, then you can check out the link in the description to get the King of Light bundle pack. Click on subscribe, and if you're up for a challenge, then you might want to watch this video next.